Welcome everyone to episode 1 of Pushing Consciousness. I'm still new to this whole YouTube thing, but hopefully there should be something popping up somewhere with a link to the introduction into this series, but in the circumstance where I mess it up somehow, which is pretty likely, you could still find a link to that video in the description. Now, without further ado, let's get thinking. The self. Depending on what you've been exposed to and personally believe, our individual perceptions of the self can vary. If you're a neurologist, you may believe that the brain is the self, as it is the primary conductor of our body's mechanisms and our consciousness. If you widen the lens, you may incorporate the entire body into your perception of the self. Your face, your hair, your arms, and your legs. Let's widen the lens again. Perhaps your perception of the self is intertwined with society and how you fit into society. Confidence, or lack thereof, for example, can be explained by an individual's perception of how they are viewed by and within society. I'm not here to say that any of those perceptions are wrong. In fact, I probably will never flat out say that any beliefs are wrong on this channel, unless we're talking in absolutes, which we very rarely will be. However, what I will be doing is offering alternative ideas that challenge conventional thinking. Now, before I present that alternative idea, allow me to play a segment of an old interview with Bob Proctor, an author and lecturer.
I met a man here in Toronto. He was the one that originally got me involved in studying this, Ray Stanford. And he told me if I didn't like the results I was getting in my life, that I was going to have to change me because they were my results. And he said, if you're going to change you, you're going to have to find out something about yourself. And that seemed to make sense. I don't think it was an earth-shattering idea. It wouldn't give anybody a brain hernia, but it made a hell of a lot of sense to me. So I started to study myself. I found most people don't know who they are. They really don't.
What do you mean? I mean, I know my name, I know my age, I know where I live.
Yeah, that's not
what
you,
else
though.
Is there?
You know, that's just
size,
it. If you ask the average person who they are, they'll give you their name. They'll say, I'm Bob Proctor, but I'm not. Bob and Proctor are two words. My parents give them to me. They're called names, but it's not me. It's my name. Then somebody will say, well, this is me, but this isn't me either. It's my body. Like, you never phone down here to the studio and say, body won't be in today, it's sick.
Okay.
You know, we don't say am hand or am leg. It's my hand, my leg, my body, my name. Who am I? Well, that's an interesting question. And I believe if a person will start to study that and look for the answer, they'll find it.
I just love that interview so much. I recommend listening to more of it, and the link to that will be in the description if you wish to do so. But let's break down what he meant. When he talks about how many perceive the self as the body, he very brilliantly highlights the vocabulary that we use. We say our body, our brain. How can the body or the brain truly be the self when we still refer to them using the word our? The word our illustrates that there is something deeper that possesses the body and the brain. Same thing when we say our name. A name is given to us solely for social identity. It is not at all who we are. So who are we? What do we truly exist as? What do all of the previous perceptions of the self have in common? What unites those who believe that the brain is a self, or that the body is a self, or our consciousness, or maybe even those who believe that the soul is the self, which raises even more questions, but either way, what unites them? All of these different perceptions have the same perspective, a selfish one. Virtually every idea of the self comes from our own perspective and goes outward rather than inward. Even the perception of self, which intertwines with society, is inherently selfish. Though you could argue the perspective changes slightly, almost to this weird second person point of view, we still look at the self as an absolute being. We attempt to examine ourselves the same way we examine those around us. To do that, especially effectively, is a truly impressive feat of the mind and does expand our consciousness. Absolutely it does. As I said earlier, I'm not here to put down ideas, but to simply challenge them. So allow me to push even further and ask an important question. When did you first exist? That seems like a weird question, right? I'm not sure how they do it in other countries, but here in the United States, when you're born, the government gives your parents a little piece of paper called a birth certificate, which has your name and birthday, among other things. So isn't it obvious when we came to exist when it's written down on a little piece of paper? Personally, I don't think so. When you're brought home as a little baby for the first time, often there's already a room made for you. The walls might be painted a certain color depending on your gender. You'll have a little crib, maybe some toys in the corner, etc. And where am I going with this? Well, how can we say that our existence is correlative to the date on that little sheet of paper, indicating when we first physically came into this world, when the idea of us already existed? That bedroom with baby blue walls in my childhood home is proof that my existence at minimum came months before my birth. Let me use another personal anecdote. I'm 22 years old, a young man, no wife, no girlfriend, and yet not a day goes by where I am not thinking of and planning for the day I have children. My child will not be born for who knows how many years, but they still exist, do they not? Let's go to the flip side so that I could illustrate my point further. Odds are anyone who is watching this has known someone who has died. Do they no longer exist? This is a subjective line of thinking, I admit. You could say that they don't, and I would have a hard time disproving you. I acknowledge that. But let me attempt to disprove a potential argument against their existence nonetheless. I believe that some would say that the dead no longer exist, but merely have existed with a past tense. However, I would be very careful with this line of thinking. In my opinion, something either exists or it does not. If you're going to say that something no longer exists because it is no longer present, there will be an ever-expanding list of possible things that do not exist. A foreign nation you have never visited, an animal you've never seen, a person you've never met. It is a very dangerous line of thought to go down. An intriguing one, don't get me wrong, but dangerous nonetheless. An example. In order to watch this video, you have to have a phone or laptop or tablet or something electronic. Let's just save time and say your phone, since most people have one. If your phone was smashed into pieces in front of you, does it no longer exist? Its pieces are right there, but it's not really a phone anymore, it's just pieces. If all phones in the world collectively stopped working at the same time and humanity lost the ability to fix them or produce them anymore, phones are just permanently gone, do they no longer exist? What if the blueprints and the means to build a phone were suddenly found, but none had been produced yet? Do they exist, or do they need to actually be produced? Do you see how this line of thought is easily very questionable, and why it is much more efficient to deal in simpler terms of either existing or not? So now let's loop all the way back around. What is the self? If we exist before birth and after death, the self surely is not the brain or the body. That would not make sense. So what can we possibly be if not only an idea? That's going to wrap up episode 1, but as I promised, I'm going to end every video with a question to make you think. These questions are going to serve as a segue into future videos, and today I have 2. The first is going to lead us into episode 2, and it goes as follows. What are the implications of the self merely being an idea, and how should it affect our worldview? My second question will lead me into a video separate from the series that will be examining God. If you're not into religion, this video will be especially for you, because you are the ones that will be challenged the most and in turn reap the most rewards. But if you are religious, I believe it will be extremely good for you as well, and maybe even give you an argument to use against those who tell you that your God is not real. So, the second question goes as follows. If our existence is dependent on the mere idea of us, does the idea of God also prove the existence of God? And if not, how? Thank you all for watching. It would mean so much to me if you interacted with this video as much as you want, but I'm so grateful for anyone who even watches. Hopefully you stick around. If you want any other content, you could find other platforms in the description. I'm most active on Twitter and on my website. That's all I have for today. Thank you all very much for watching. Peace.